Ladies and gentlemen, in a shocking and deeply unsettling moment at a rally in South Florida, former President Donald Trump raised the stakes in America's political war of words, this time by directly threatening to jail sitting Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The crowd roared, the cameras zoomed in. Trump, never one to shy away from incendiary rhetoric, leaned into the microphone and declared, "When I'm back in the White House, people like AOC won't just be tweeting, they'll be in jail." His words sent an immediate shockwave across social media, newsrooms, and Capitol Hill. Supporters cheered. Opponents gasped, and as the right-wing echo chamber amplified the threat into a show of dominance, the question wasn't whether Trump had crossed the line, it was whether there was still a line at all. Within minutes, clips of the rally were spliced, captioned, and fed to tens of millions via Twitter, Truth Social, Fox News, and YouTube. The headlines wrote themselves, "Trump dominates AOC, she's going down, he's taking control." As expected, the MAGA machine sprang into full gear. Conservative influencers celebrated the moment as if it were a prophecy fulfilled. From Marjorie Taylor Greene to Steve Bannon, Trump's loyalists echoed the call, "Lock her up!" The crowd in Florida had become a rally of vengeance, and AOC was now target number one. But behind the digital curtain, beyond the viral memes and snarky commentary, a deeper, darker reality was unfolding, one that threatened the very structure of America's democratic norms. To his base, Trump's words weren't just about a single Congresswoman. They were a declaration of war against a new generation of leadership, young, progressive, fearless, and unbought. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, for all the attacks she receives daily, represents a fundamental shift in American politics. A working-class woman of color from the Bronx who rose from bartender to Congress, she's everything Trump isn't, and that terrifies him. His threat wasn't rooted in policy. It wasn't about ethics. It was about power, raw, vengeful power. AOC to Trump is a symbol of the future he can't control, and that's why he wants her silenced. But let's rewind. This wasn't the first time Trump had flirted with authoritarian fantasies. From the infamous "lock her up" chants aimed at Hillary Clinton in 2016 to his calls for prosecuting journalists and opponents, Trump has long treated democracy like a game show and accountability as optional. What made this moment different was the timing. With criminal indictments piling up, court appearances looming, and political pressure mounting, Trump's need to redirect attention reached a fever pitch. Threatening AOC wasn't just a show of force, it was a distraction. A way to make headlines without substance, all while firing up a base increasingly detached from political reality. As expected, right-wing pundits latched on immediately. Tucker Carlson, now broadcasting from the shadows of independent media, declared it a long overdue reckoning. AOC has spent years accusing patriots of being white supremacists, he said. She's called for defunding the police, dismantling ICE, and now she wants open borders. If anyone deserves to be investigated, it's her. The irony, of course, was lost on him. There were no crimes, no investigations, no evidence, just raw projection. The real story wasn't that AOC was crumbling, it was that Trump and his media allies were desperately constructing a fantasy in which she could be made to crumble. As the headlines screamed and Twitter trended, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat in silence for exactly 6 hours, no tweets, no statements, no retweets or quotes. For a politician known for her rapid-fire responses and razor-sharp comebacks, the quiet was deafening. Right-wing pundits immediately declared victory. "She's running scared," one Newsmax host claimed. "Trump broke her." The MAGA faithful ate it up. They posted edited videos with shaky voiceovers showing AOC retreating, layered with dramatic music and fake crying sounds. It was the kind of manufactured collapse that only the digital far right can pull off. Loud, viral, and completely disconnected from the truth. Because behind the silence, something else was brewing. When AOC finally broke her silence, she did it with surgical precision. No long thread, no emotional tirade. Just a single post on X. Threatening elected officials with prison for doing their jobs isn't strength. It's what fascists do. It was a thunderclap. In fewer than 20 words, she flipped the narrative. No fear, no retreat, just clarity and fire. The post exploded instantly, racking up millions of views in minutes. Progressive allies like Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Pressley reposted it. Even moderates who don't often align with AOC's politics voiced support. "This isn't about left or right anymore," one Democrat said. "This is about the rule of law." In that moment, the myth of AOC's so-called collapse shattered like glass. What followed was a series of devastating interviews that recentered the public debate, not around Trump's circus, but around the threat he posed to democracy itself. On MSNBC, AOC appeared calm but forceful. "This is no longer political theater," she told Rachel Maddow. When a former president, under multiple indictments, is publicly threatening to jail his political opponents if re-elected, that's not a campaign speech. That's a blueprint for dictatorship. The segment went viral, not because it was flashy, but because it cut through the noise. Even some Republican voters took notice. One viral comment read, "I don't like her policies, but she's absolutely right about Trump. This is insane." Meanwhile, legal scholars began weighing in. Could Trump actually jail a member of Congress? The short answer, absolutely not. At least not without cause. But the long answer revealed something far more troubling. Under a weaponized Department of Justice and with compliant allies in Congress, a re-elected Trump could launch endless investigations, smear campaigns, and bureaucratic harassment, none of which would lead to justice, but all of which could have a chilling effect on dissent. It wouldn't matter whether AOC had broken any laws. The point would be to intimidate her, to bury her in legal quicksand, and if not her, then others like her. And that's where the real danger lies. Because this wasn't just about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It was about the message being sent to every young organizer, activist, or elected official who dares to speak up. Trump's threat wasn't a one-off. It was a warning. Shot, a test balloon. And the fact that it was cheered so openly by millions showed just how deeply authoritarian instincts have taken hold in parts of the American electorate. AOC, as usual, understood this before most. In a follow-up interview, she didn't focus on herself. "If they can try to silence me, they can silence any of you," she said. We can't let that happen. Across college campuses, protest groups, and union halls, her message resonated. AOC's Instagram livestream days later drew over 500,000 live viewers, more than most cable shows pull in a night. In it, she peeled back the layers. "This is about power, corruption, and fear," she said. "Donald Trump wants people afraid of standing up to him. That's what bullies do. But the second you stop fearing them, they lose everything." Her words hit like a lightning strike. TikTok lit up with clips. Gen Z creators stitched her stream with their own commentary, offering support, analysis, and memes mocking Trump's fragile ego. A digital army was mobilizing, not in fear but in defiance, and while conservative media continued pushing the narrative that Trump had dominated AOC, the real numbers told a different story. Donations to progressive candidates surged, interest in grassroots town halls spiked, voter registration efforts, especially among women and people of color, saw a measurable uptick in the days after Trump's threat. In trying to scare her into silence, Trump had accidentally amplified her voice, and that, more than anything, exposed the flaw in his strategy. He misunderstood his opponent. AOC wasn't Hillary Clinton. She wasn't Nancy Pelosi. She wasn't someone who played by the old rules. She thrived in the digital battlefield where Trump thought he was king. Behind the scenes, Capitol Hill was buzzing. Democrats began drafting a formal resolution condemning Trump's threat, while a coalition of progressive and centrist lawmakers met privately to discuss heightened security for targeted members of Congress. The parallels to January 6th weren't lost on anyone. We're watching a former president hint at political purges, and a portion of the country is cheering, one senator said off record. If that doesn't wake people up, what will? For AOC, the question was never about what Trump would do next. It was what we would do to stop it. "Democracy is a team sport," she reminded her audience. "It only works if we show up."
As the pressure mounted, so did the stakes. Trump's threat had opened a Pandora's box, not just for AOC, but for the entire progressive movement. The media, especially on the right, kept trying to paint it as a moment of AOC's collapse. "She's finished," one Daily Wire host proclaimed. "She can't take the heat." But the more they repeated it, the less convincing it became. Because there was no collapse. There were no tears. There was no retreat. What they were witnessing, what they were desperately trying to rewrite, was not a breakdown. It was a transformation. AOC was evolving, shifting into something even more powerful than before, not just a progressive icon but a symbol of political resistance itself. In fact, the very attempts to destroy her only enhanced her stature. AOC began speaking not just about Trump's threat, but about the broader trend it represented. "We're living in a moment where authoritarianism wears a suit and tie," she said during a televised town hall. "They won't just kick down your door, they'll pass laws, they'll use courts, they'll pretend it's justice. But it's not. It's revenge." Her clarity cut through the smog of political spin. And people, especially young people, listened. They didn't see a woman crumbling under pressure. They saw a leader refusing to back down. A generation raised on injustice was now seeing someone fight it in real time. Meanwhile, Trump continued his media blitz. In yet another rambling Truth Social post, he doubled down on his claim, suggesting AOC should be investigated for treason and anti-American activity, accusations with no basis in reality, but plenty of fuel for the MAGA machine. And still, no indictments were filed. No investigations launched. It was all theater. But that was the point. In Trump's world, the spectacle is the story. It doesn't have to be true, it just has to be loud. And as the base soaked it up, the rest of the country looked on with a growing sense of alarm. Because if this could happen to a sitting congresswoman, what could stop it from happening to others? AOC, of course, understood this intuitively. She didn't just defend herself, she used the moment to elevate others. In a surprise appearance at a Chicago Youth Leadership Conference, she addressed over 2,000 high school and college students. "They want you quiet," she told them. "They want you tired. They want you to think this is normal. Threats, lies, intimidation. But this is not normal. This is what happens when we don't show up. So now we show up harder." The room erupted in cheers. This wasn't damage control. It was momentum building. She was rewriting the narrative live and the world was watching. And that's when something unexpected happened. For the first time, mainstream outlets that had often dismissed her as too radical began shifting their tone. Editorial boards at major newspapers started warning against Trump's authoritarian flirtations. CNN, typically cautious in its language, aired a special segment titled "Authoritarianism in America, a Warning from History," which featured AOC's recent interviews as a central thread. "Say what you will about her politics," the host admitted, "but you can't ignore what she's warning about." AOC wasn't just in the story. She was the story, and the framing had shifted from target to truth teller. Even global media took notice. In Europe, headlines read, "Trump threatens rising star in U.S. Congress," and "AOC, the voice that won't be silenced." International human rights groups condemned Trump's rhetoric, comparing it to tactics used by populist strongmen in Hungary, Brazil, and the Philippines. It was clear. This wasn't a small domestic spat. This was a reflection of the world's most watched democracy teetering under the weight of its own unresolved tensions. And through it all, AOC stood steady, not because she was invincible, but because she was prepared. "They underestimate me because of where I'm from," she said in one viral moment. That's their mistake. By the time a full week had passed, the public narrative had done a complete 180. What started as Trump's attempt to appear dominant ended with him exposed as increasingly unhinged. AOC's presence had only grown. Donations to her peak surged. Her social media following exploded. Even moderate Democrats who had previously kept her at arm's length began publicly defending her. And the MAGA base. They had exhausted themselves on yet another fake takedown. But AOC? She had weathered the storm and come out sharper, louder, and more unshakable than before. "This isn't just about me," she said at the end of her live stream. It's about every voice they try to silence. So here's my message to them. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are we.